Thanks, Kira. Good morning, everyone. Great to be with you this morning. We're finishing our series this morning called How to Follow Jesus for Real. And I want to be really real this morning by talking about doubt. How do you follow Jesus for real when you have doubts and questions about your faith? I had a conversation with a friend a couple of weeks ago. We know each other just because we happen to go to the same cafe often enough that we've struck up a friendship, and we talk a couple of times a week. Now, it's one of those friendships where, we've had some good, deep spiritual conversations, which I love, but I can't remember his name. And it's at that awkward point where it's too late to ask. Anyway, we're best buds. If only we knew each other's names. But he was telling me the other day that he grew up Catholic, so in Catholic church and Catholic school. And as he grew up, he started to have questions. Questions about what he'd read or see or whatever about the age of the earth and evolution and fossils and things like that. And then he'd hear the Bible stories about Adam and Eve and that creation account. And then he'd go, all right, well, Adam and Eve had sons. And then it says that their sons got married. Who did their sons marry if they were the first people in the world? And all of those are really good questions. And so he started asking those questions of his teachers in the school and of the priests in the church. And every single time he asked a question, the answer was, shh, stop asking questions. Just believe. Just have faith. It doesn't matter about those details. This is not the place for questions. Just believe and have faith that God's got it sorted and he created the world and he'll give you the answer one day. And so my friend continued on with his life and got to the point pretty quickly that he believes now that God doesn't exist at all. And he said to me, but it's all right, I've got a plan. I've got a plan if I'm wrong. If God exists and there's a heaven and there's pearly gates there and when I die, that's where I am and I've got to give an account for my life, my response and my answer is going to be, well, I'm sorry, the version that you gave me of Christianity was crap. And so I did what I was supposed to do with that. I was like, wow. I had two thoughts immediately. One was, I hope we get to have a lot more conversations because there's a lot I want to explore there. But the second thing was, I wish someone had taken his question seriously. Because he's not alone. It's not a Catholic thing, it's a Christian thing, that we don't always handle questions or doubts well when they come from others or even when they come from ourselves. We're not really sure what to do with them. We think it's kind of a sign of failure. But I'm here to tell you today that questions and doubts and faith can and should live together, particularly in the life of a follower of Jesus. The question isn't whether you're going to face doubt in your faith. It's really a matter of when. And it might be today, it might be something from the past and you're at peace with it now, and maybe you've never experienced any doubt and you have no questions and you're all good, but let me confirm for you, you will at one time in the future face some doubts. And they might be questions like, you could be sitting here right now this morning and this thought or this feeling might have already come into your life. What are we actually doing here? Does God even exist, or are we just kidding ourselves as we gather here on Sunday and sing some songs? Or you might have been praying one day and you go, is God really listening to my prayers? Or is this just for my sake? Or you might have questions about the universe or about life that you don't have good answers to and you've never heard good answers to. Or you might experience some horrible suffering in your life, or you see horrible suffering in other people's lives, and you just think, how can God exist and be loving while this horrible stuff is going on? Or you might read things in the Bible and go, that does not make any sense to me, and it doesn't match up with anything that I know about life or relationships or the world, and so I don't know what to do with this book. And you probably think, I'm the only one with this particular doubt or with this particular question. The surprising thing about doubt is not actually that it exists. The surprising thing about doubt is that you think you're the only one. But let me tell you that you're in good company. Hi, my name's Geoff, and I have doubts and questions about the Christian faith. And even before you tell me that you do as well, I know that I'm in good company because some of Jesus' closest followers had doubts and questions about him. And they saw him and touched him and heard him speak and saw him do miracles. And so I figure if they had doubts and questions, it's okay for me to have them as well. Let me just point out a couple of them. John the Baptist was Jesus' own cousin, had lots to do with each other. When they were both adults, John realized Jesus wasn't just his cousin, he was also the one that God had promised for centuries, the Messiah, the Son of God. John was one of the first people to realize that by God's revelation, saw in some form the Holy Spirit descend and rest on Jesus when John baptized him, saw incredible things. But then years later, going through a really rough patch in his life, John's in prison. He goes, I just don't know anymore. And so he sent some of his own disciples to Jesus and he said, are you really the one? Or should we keep looking for someone else? And then, a couple of years down the track from that, Jesus has died and risen from the dead. Lots of people have seen him. And then one particular time, just before they're about to see him ascend to heaven, a whole group of his disciples saw him at the same time. Probably wasn't just the 12, it was probably the 120-ish that saw him that day. And it says that they worshipped him, but some doubted. Like, what? I think if I could see Jesus, that would be enough to dispel all doubts. But they saw him and some worshipped and some doubted, even with that living, breathing experience. And I have doubts and questions too. I have doubts because I can't understand God in his infiniteness because I'm not infinite, I'm finite. I have questions because I can't see where all this is going and how all this fits together. I have doubts because there's stuff I read in the Bible that I find confronting and challenging and confusing. And I have questions because God doesn't make everything as clear as I would like him to make it. But the good news that I particularly wanted to bring to you today is that doubt is a sign that your faith is growing beyond simple answers. Doubt can be a good thing. Doubt can be a really good sign that you're not settling for simple answers anymore, but your faith is growing beyond those simple answers. You know, we often treat doubt like failure. It's not. We often think doubt will lead to failure. It doesn't have to. Doubt can be a sign that you're just not settling for simple answers anymore. Let's dig in a little deeper into one of the stories of doubters in Jesus' life. And this was the guy who got the nickname Doubting Thomas, which is really unfortunate because right up until that point, his nickname was the twin because he was one. And then from however old he is, let's say he's in his late teens, early 20s, for the rest of his life and the rest of human history, thanks to the gospel of, what are we going to read? We're going to read in John, I think, in John 20, thanks to his friend John recording it, we now call him Doubting Thomas. That's his new nickname, which is unfortunate because it's just a moment. It's just this honest, desperate statement that he makes. But Thomas had lived with Jesus for 3 years, traveled with him everywhere, seen incredible things, and then Jesus had died. And he'd appeared to some of the other disciples. And we pick up the story in John chapter 20, in verse 24. It says that one of the 12 disciples, Thomas, till that point, nicknamed the twin, was not with the others when Jesus came. And they told him, we've seen the Lord. He's not dead anymore, he's alive. But Thomas replied, I won't believe it. I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands from the cross and put my fingers into them, into those wounds, and place my hand into the wound in his side where the soldiers put a spear in to make sure he was dead. He said, I'm not going to believe it unless I see it and I touch him, and that'll be enough. Then I'll believe. Thomas wasn't rejecting Jesus with this statement. Thomas was heartbroken. Everything that Thomas knew was over, because Jesus was dead, and that was the end of everything that he'd hoped for. It shattered everything he thought was true. And I wonder if you can relate that maybe is the cause of some of your doubts and questions as well. That life has knocked you around. And it's made you question things that once upon a time you thought were certain. But now life is way more complicated, and those simple answers just don't hit the mark for those complicated questions. And so you're letting go of simple answers, but you don't know how to find deeper answers. And then you read about or you watch on social media people that call themselves ex-evangelicals, who are deconstructing, their faith is being pulled apart, and they're finding freedom in that. And you go, well, that's what I want, but I don't want to let go of Jesus. And so you find yourself somewhere in the messy middle there with faith and with doubt, and you don't know what to do. And you're like Thomas. You're expressing real doubt and asking really good questions, but you're not sure where to go with it or what to do. And I think most of us think that God is disappointed when we're in that space. If we're like Thomas and we're saying statements like that, or we're asking questions like that, we think just generally God's perspective on that is anger, that he's not happy with it, and he'd like us to sort it out so that we can have complete faith in him without any questions. Because it's either in or out with God, right? And so if we're not in, then we might as well not be in the room. So let's see how Jesus, as the Son of God, as the full expression of God, treated Thomas with his doubts and questions. So verse 26, the very next line in John's account, 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. And the doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. Peace be with you, he said. And then he turns to Thomas and he says, put your finger here and look at my hands. Put your hand into the wound in my side. Don't be faithless any longer. Believe. And Thomas exclaims, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says to him, you believe because you've seen me, but blessed are those who believe without seeing me. And Jesus isn't angry with him. Jesus doesn't ridicule him. He doesn't shame him or mock him. He invites Thomas to come and see. I hear what you've said. Come and see. Come closer. Jesus meets Thomas where he is in his doubts. And then Thomas, as a result of that experience, makes one of the greatest declarations, greatest confessions of faith in the New Testament. The doubter becomes the worshipper. Which it would be cool for him if that was his third nickname. We don't call him Doubting Thomas, but Worshipping Thomas. But hey, for today's purposes, it's helpful. And then Jesus says, hey, this is good. You've seen and you've believed, but there's going to be other people who'll be even more blessed who believe without seeing. Which is going to have to be you and I, because we don't have a physical Jesus with us. He's risen and ascended. We'll have the physical Jesus in the future, but right now we don't. We can't see him. We can't touch him. We can't put our hands in the wounds. We have to trust based on good reasons without having certainty. Which is actually how all of our human relationships work. Every meaningful relationship in your life involves trust before you have certainty. For those of you who are married in the room, you had to at some point trust that this was the right commitment to enter with this person who'd become your spouse. And you get to know them and you observe them over a period of time and you start to get some idea, but you definitely don't have certainty. There has to be trust before certainty. For those of you who are parents, you do whatever you can to prepare. You might read some books, you might watch some videos, you might get some advice, you might prepare the room, you might buy a pram, you do as much as you can, but really you have no idea what it's going to be like until it happens. You have to have trust before certainty. And following Jesus is really similar. There is the right place for questions, and there is the right place for answers and for truth and for evidence, and those things do exist, but at some point you have to trust Jesus before you're certain about him. And sometimes you can choose to trust him even when you were certain and now you're not again and you're not sure where it's going to go. You can still choose to trust even without certainty. Because the ultimate question about Christianity, the ultimate question about Jesus is, can you trust him? It's not about whether you can line everything up and it all works. It's just, can you trust Jesus. And so the other great doubting story I want to talk about is a man in Mark chapter 9. He said he had both. He had belief and doubt at the very same time. In Mark 9, Jesus walks into an argument that's already happening between his disciples and some religious leaders. And the focus of their argument is a family. It's a man with a son. And the man has brought his son to the situation, particularly to Jesus' disciples, for healing. Because his son, he says, has an evil spirit that sends him into seizures and convulsions and will throw him into the fire and stops him from speaking. And he's like, he really needs help. And that's what's caused this argument that Jesus walks into. And so for the boy, when the spirit in the boy sees Jesus, it throws him into one of those convulsions. And the dad freaks out. And the dad says, have mercy on us and help us if you can. And Jesus says, what do you mean if I can? Of course I can. And the father says desperately, I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. What does that mean? That's a nothing statement. Jesus is like, of course I can help you. And he's like, well, I believe that, but help me overcome my unbelief. It's such an honest answer. It's such an honest prayer. He's not pretending. He's not hiding. He's not trying to perform for Jesus or clean himself up before he comes to Jesus. He just simply says, well, look, part of me believes that you can, for sure. But there's this other part of me and it struggles to believe. So can you help me in this situation where I'm torn between the two? That could describe you this morning as when you think about Jesus or you think about Christianity. You go, yeah, well, I do believe, but also there's parts of me that don't believe. I do believe Jesus, but help me also with my unbelief. And if you're hearing this story for the very first time, you're not going to believe Jesus' response. He says to the man, too bad. I can only do miracles when people are 100% certain. So let's just let your son finish his seizure. No, that's not what he says. He says, that's close, but it's not close enough. If you give a large donation to me and my disciples, then I could heal your son because that will cover your doubt. No, he doesn't say that either. He says, haven't you read that Bible verse? Fake it till you make it. You didn't have to be honest with me. Just pretend and I'll do whatever you need me to do. No, and it's not a Bible verse, by the way, in case you're wondering. Don't be searching Proverbs for that. It'd be in the Old Testament, of course, but it's not. It's a fake Bible verse. Jesus doesn't say any of those things. He actually doesn't even react or respond to the man. He says nothing. He just commands the spirit to leave, and the boy is lying there on the ground as if he's dead. And Jesus reaches down and grabs him by the hand and helps him up. And everyone is amazed and in awe at the miracle, but I'm also amazed and in awe at Jesus' response to the man's doubt and his honesty. He meets him right in the middle of his uncertainty. And that's real faith. Real faith, following Jesus for real, is always a mixture of faith and some certainty perhaps, and doubt and some uncertainty on the other hand. It's always a mixture. I was talking to a friend on Friday about this, and he said he'd heard it explained like a coin. And I meant to bring one. And anyway, you've seen a coin, right? You know, they have two sides. Faith and doubt, he said, are two sides of the same coin as a follower of Jesus. They're always both there all the time. And you can flip the coin and they'll spin, but both sides are always there. They're not different coins. They're two sides of the same coin, faith and doubt living together. And it's when you're able to accept both those things and bring both of those things to Jesus, that's when you really begin to follow him and trust him. Because somewhere along the way, you probably thought that you had to get rid of all the doubt and deal with all the questions so that you only had one side of the coin and that's what you could finally bring to Jesus. But the stories that we've read tell us that's not true at all. Jesus wants us to bring everything we have to him, including the doubts, including the questions. We can bring our doubts to Jesus. Now, I'm not sure what doubts or questions you have this morning. It could be big existential ones, the kind of ones that keep you up at night just wondering about the universe, the existence of God. Is he even there, or are these just made up stories that we've told ourselves to bring us comfort in life. I have doubts like that pop up sometimes. And I have to stop and go, hang on a minute, let me take that seriously and think that through and pray that through and bring those questions and doubts to Jesus. What do I really think about that? Don't let it just get hold of me without challenging it, but take it seriously and really think about that. And for me, those big existential things are generally quick and passing, but they may not be for you. They might really linger and stay, and you might find that really difficult in your faith. That's okay. It might not be big existential questions. Your doubts might be more about, how do I actually follow Jesus today? What does it mean to be a follower of Jesus and a Christian today when I see different forms of that? I see other Christians living in different ways and making different conclusions. I see the world around me living in different ways and living different conclusions. How do I make sense of that? How do I make sense of war between nations? How do I make sense of the climate and what's happening? How do I make sense of the way my friends are living and their decisions? How do I find my way through questions about sexuality? What does this mean? What does me being a follower of Jesus mean for my relationships and my commitments? You can bring all of those doubts and all of those questions to Jesus as well. He's not waiting for you to figure them out. He wants you to come. Bring your faith, bring your doubts, bring your questions, and come anyway, because you can trust him even if you don't have answers to those things. You know, I said right at the start, the doubt can be a really good thing because it means that you're not settling for simple answers anymore. It's part of growing up. It's part of growing up as a Christian, doubt is. It's a good thing. You need it. But then you enter this messy middle. And the ironic thing is that as you move through the messy middle, when you eventually start to find your way to the other side of a particular doubt or a particular question, you actually find that there's something simple again on the other side. But it's not a simple answer, it's simple trust. It's saying that I can actually trust Jesus, the person, Jesus, the Son of God, even though I can't settle for those simple answers anymore, I can now have simple trust because I'm at peace with the mixture of faith and doubt that I have. Living without certainty, which is part of growing up, means letting go of simple answers and learning to hold on to simple trust. So the most dangerous thing about having doubt is not dealing with it yourself, pretending it doesn't exist, not bringing it to Jesus. But then the next most dangerous thing is just suffering with it alone, thinking you're the only person who has those questions and you can't tell anyone. But it's not just safe to bring your doubts to Jesus. It also needs to be safe to bring your doubts to church. In Jude, a one-chapter letter in the New Testament, super short. Jude writes this letter in verse 22. He says, show mercy to those whose faith is wavering. Or in the NIV, for our purposes today, be merciful to those who doubt. Same thing, just different English words. That means that the church should be the safest place in Cairns to bring your doubts. That the Lakes Church should be the safest place for you to say, I'm not really sure about Jesus. Because we show mercy to those who bring their questions and bring their doubts. And one of the blessings of community is the ability to be able to hold those things with each other and work through those things together as a community. Real people with real faith and real questions who bring it all to Jesus and find our way forward with him. You know, I'm at the point in my life where I welcome doubts more than ever. Myself, my own doubts, the doubts of others, not being able to land on a one-size-fits-all decision about something as a church community, not knowing the answer to things. And the big reason why I welcome my doubts more and your doubts more than ever is because I think I trust Jesus more than ever. So I can say I don't know the answer to that question, and I don't know if I ever will know the answer to whatever question it is, but I trust Jesus more than I ever have before. And I'm about to finish, but I've been kind of umming and ahhing the last 24 hours. And let me just share one last little thing. Think about the story that we talked about, Thomas. So Thomas brings his doubts to Jesus, and essentially what is Jesus' response? It's, come and see. And then the man expresses his doubts, the father expresses his doubts to Jesus, says, I believe, but help me overcome my unbelief. And Jesus doesn't answer, but what essentially does he say? He's like, watch this, come and see. Then I didn't finish the story about John the Baptist, but when he's in prison and he sends his disciples to Jesus and they say, hey, John says, are you really the one? Or should we keep looking for someone else? What Jesus says is, go back to John and tell him what you've seen. Go back to John and tell him what you've seen. Have a look around. The blind can see, the lame can walk, dead people are receiving life again, and good news is being proclaimed to the poor. Come and see. And so Jesus' answer, if you go, I just don't know what to make of this thing and I just can't figure it out. He doesn't go, bloop, here's the answer. He says, hey, come and see, come and have a look. And maybe on behalf of others in community, John and his disciples, it's, hey, this person has doubt and they're struggling. Let's be merciful to them. Why don't you share with them about your trust in Jesus and what you've seen? Karl Barth, B-A-R-T-H, was a Swiss theologian. He died in the 1960s, so many years ago now. He was 82 when he died. Huge man physically, huge man intellectually. Karl Barth had more answers to questions than I'll ever even have questions. He was just that kind of smart and follower of Jesus his whole life, wrote lots of things, contributed incredibly to the church and to Christianity. Right near the end of his life, though, he made one of his most memorable statements, the one that I've ever heard quoted the most about Karl Barth. So he wrote all these books, gave all these lectures. In 1962, he's traveling in the US giving different lectures. And after one of them, he has a Q&A session, and someone gets up and they say, hey, Dr. Barth, do you reckon you could summarize, they probably didn't say, do you reckon? It's in America and in the 1960s, but let me translate. Do you reckon you could put all of your life's work in theology down into one statement? Like everything that you know about God, everything you've studied and learned and written about, would it be possible to put all of that into one statement, like your life's work in one statement as a Christian theologian? And he said, yes, I can. In the words that I learnt of a song at my mother's knee, Jesus loves me. This I know, for the Bible tells me so. This is one of the smartest Christians that'll ever live. Said really the essence of what I've come to believe is that I can trust Jesus. Now, it's not just the words of a song. We have it printed in our parent rooms. It's also the essence of our faith in Jesus is not having every answer, but being able to trust him because we know that he loves us, because it's been recorded for us in the pages of the New Testament by people that saw him and heard him and were loved by him. And based on all of that, we know that we can trust him. So following Jesus for real was never about having every answer. It's about trusting the one who does. And maybe this morning you consider yourself a committed Christian, but you've been carrying private questions that you've been too scared to voice or tell anyone else about. Maybe you've been newly baptized, a newer follower of Jesus, and discovering that faith is harder than you expected it would be. Maybe you still think of yourself as exploring Christianity and you're not sure what you believe and haven't really made a decision about whether you can trust Jesus. But for every single one of you, the invitation is the same. Come and see. Bring your doubts to Jesus. And bring up your doubts with someone that you trust. Because none of us need perfect certainty to be a follower of Jesus. We just need enough trust to take the next step in following him. Let's pause for a minute or so and then I want to pray for you. just want to invite you just in the moment of quietness, just to let those thoughts and doubts and questions bubble up. And maybe you're giving them permission for the very first time to bubble up in church. Jesus is here by his Spirit, here with you in the room. And so let's just sit and let those things bubble up for us. Jesus, I ask, would you make your presence known and felt to us today? The same Jesus that we've been recounting the stories about, who, when other people let their doubts and their questions rise up to the surface, there was no anger, there was no distance. There was this incredible compassion and an invitation to come closer. So Jesus, would you bless us today with enough trust to know that we can bring our doubts to you, with enough trust with someone else that we can bring up our doubts with them and explore them together. And Jesus, would you lead us as we follow you, not back to simpler answers, but through the questions and through the doubt, finding some answers along the way for sure, but ultimately knowing that we can trust you, even if we're still not sure. I ask that in your name. Amen.